Welcome to Griefline's Courageous Conversations series, where we delve into meaningful dialogues with leaders, organisations, and members of the community aiming to address the multifaceted impacts of grief and loss. Our latest Courageous Conversation is with Catherine Ashton, founder of the Australian death tech startup Critical Info. Catherine and Griefline's Chief Marketing Officer Louisa Smith explore the death care industry and discuss how planning your legacy can not only create empowerment, but also support you and your loved ones through grief. Hello, Catherine Ashton, and welcome to Griefline's Courageous Conversations. Catherine, you are the founder of trailblazing death care and planning, end-of-life planning business Critical Info, and we are just really privileged to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Louisa.
So you were touched by two very significant life experiences that prompted you to develop Critical Info. What is end-of-life planning and why is it so important?
Yeah, the two incidents that sort of led me to be where I am today was a car accident in 2019, and was just on my way to work and was hit from behind, and that led to subsequent spinal surgery and the development of chronic pain. So I unfortunately had to leave my job at the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria, where I was for 13 years as a producer of events. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. I went through a lot of rehab and really a lot of questioning about, what was the next steps and concerns about who would hire me. And then unfortunately, we had my husband's best friend, Roland, die in February of last year. And he was, divorced. He had moved back from the States and was living in Australia. And I, was trying to sort of get information together, and when he died, because his family wasn't here. His two adult kids were in the States. And so it took me sort of like 6 days of sorting through his paperwork to work out, who did he bank with? Did he have a will? Did we know whether he had any intent to be buried or cremated? So I think that's where it was born for me, or made very apparent from these experiences, just how important end of life planning is. Because, to go through that experience where you just don't know what your friend's wishes are and you're wanting to do the right thing was really, really difficult.
And look, it is not something that we think about. It's not top of mind, in our day-to-day while we're living, our lives. But can you explain how providing people with knowledge and resources to better prepare for and cope with death creates a sense of empowerment?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I was trying to put information together for his two adult children that were flying out here from the States. And what I found through my numerous Google searches was that each organisation was very good at telling its own story, but there was not one platform that actually brought those organisations together, and that's what I found that I was really needing is. So that's what I developed. So Critical Info is a website part of it is a website that we launched 8 weeks ago. And it has over 200 organisations nationally that have a focus on supporting either end-of-life planning, death care, bereavement, or estate management. And the reason why we did that is because for me, I'm all about making informed choices and knowing what my choices are. And I think that when you're in a situation when someone has died, you feel very vulnerable. And I think allowing people to have access to a platform that provides them with a range of choices that are legally available in Australia, they can then sort of feel like they can do the research and take back some sort of control, in a very, very emotional, turbulent time.
Oh, for sure. And I guess, as you know firsthand, there's so many ends that need to be tied once a loved one passes away. And it can be overwhelming and emotionally draining for most people. And we hear that firsthand on the Griefline helpline when people connect to it with us after the death of someone that they're, connected to. And particularly people managing estates and just sort of sifting through, all the required forms and information that they need to supply in order just to get a death certificate, say, for instance. So what would your advice be to ensure self-care is considered during this time?
Look, for me, I can only go by what works for me. And for me, it's all about breathing. And I find that when I just take a moment to breathe and count to 10, it sort of grounds me in where I'm at, and sort of reminds me to sort of connect in with how my body's feeling. And with my chronic pain that I've developed, it's all about pacing, and I think that that's a really good quality that everyone should perhaps remind themselves to do, is not overwhelm their to-do list with multiple tasks, but just, especially when I have found that I've been grieving, the last thing I need to do is think too much about everything that needs to happen. So I just suggest, take one task a day, and if you get that done, great. And if you don't, it doesn't matter, it'll be okay. And I think that that was the key when I was developing the guide, my loved one has died, what do I do now? Is to really make sure that we gave people a roadmap. So when someone dies, they know what are the priorities. Because I find that that's something that's really, really difficult to understand, is like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like, I don't know where to start. So this guide gives you a roadmap of what's the priority in the first 24 hours, the first days, weeks, and then months that follow after someone dies.
Yeah, absolutely. And to integrate your self-care as part of that process is key, isn't it? So I guess this is sort of a segue, is around how, to avoid our loved ones from being overwhelmed and following our own death. It's, going to happen. What steps should we all be taking care to ensure our personal affairs are taken care of, and what impact on our family is minimised in that process?
Look, I think it comes back to, when you think of it as a whole, it can be really overwhelming. So again, it comes back to what you can do that's really cheap, easy, cost effective. And the best way to start is by having a conversation, and you have a teenage son, I have a 20-year-old. I kind of liken it to when you have to have the talk about sex. It's one of those things that not everyone wants to talk about. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but you're going to have the conversation. So, have the conversation in the car. That's what they normally recommend, or around the dinner table. So it's normalized, and it doesn't have to be, okay, I want to know all of your details right here and now. But, things along the lines of, when you do die, have you thought whether you wanted to be buried or cremated? That's a really simple question to start with. And then, people, with the resources that we've got, as I mentioned, the 200 organisations on the website, they're all free. They're all free resources. The information's there. So, we've got the podcast where you can listen to other people's stories about what they've been through, or advice from experts within the industry. Your own website is just comprehensive with information about, how to deal with grieving. But there's so many, it links to so many other resources that are available out there. It's a bit of a wormhole you can go down. So there is a lot of support out there that can help you have these conversations. And also, speak to your doctor. They can be instrumental about giving you advice or giving you the forms for an advanced care directive. An advanced care directive is really, something that we don't have to wait until we get older. I had a car accident the outcome could have been very, very different for me. So we need to have these conversations now, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next hour or the next day. So, documenting, do you want to be resuscitated? That's a big thing. Would you like to be an organ donor? These are huge conversations that we need to have, but they don't have to be, I suppose the conversation doesn't have to be huge. It can be small little conversations, and that's where we start. And then, you can go in further with getting a will, getting a power of attorney, those sort of documents that are also great to have in place as well.
It's such great advice. And I was shocked that, platform such as Critical Info didn't exist. And I'm so grateful that you created it. And I'm sure it's going to be really, really well received by so many people throughout Australia. And we'll do our very best to ensure that people are aware of it. And, I think the resources you have are really, really important and needed. And just to have everything aggregated in one space is just going to take away a lot of time, but also pain and grief for those people, who are attached to that end of life planning process. So thank you so much for creating Critical Info. You're a trailblazer, and we are just so grateful for you and your time, and for sharing your story, and for having a courageous conversation with us.
Thanks so much, Louisa. I really take my hat off to you and your team for the work that you do. So thank you very much.